Welcome to the Scott and Holm podcast. Back here finally to talk about a real life Cougar football game. The football offseason, I think, always feels like it's very long. And I mean, in reality, guys, it's been over 9 months since we came on here and talked about any regular season football game. Grateful that 9 months later, we are talking about a regular season football game that was much more pleasant than the last regular season football game that we talked about. It wasn't always pretty on the eyes, but gentlemen, we are back here about 48 hours later to talk about, or 72 hours later, to talk about a Cougar win over the UTSA Roadrunners. Obviously, not the only topic to talk about tonight. Plenty to digest from week 1 of college football, Big 12, and even bigger picture than that. Of course, Cougar volleyball and soccer to talk about as well, guys. So much stuff to talk about. Won't delay any further. Dustin, my friend and co-host, how are you doing this evening, fella?
Man, I'm doing well, bud. I'm excited to be here talking to you guys. And it wasn't certainly an all good week from Cougar sports as a whole. There's going to be some ups and some downs to talk about. But, you know, getting that first game of the season underway and knowing how important it was to get the win and, can't be too upset with a victory of any kind.
Sure can't. Bobby, how you doing, amigo?
Good, buddy. Good. Holiday weekend for work means extra work for me, but we are here ready to go and talk some Cougar sports.
We sure are. Of course, before we get to the top, little admin here, but admin we always enjoy here. Please do follow our friends at the 1012 Network, our network partners over there at TN12 Network on Twitter, Blue Sky, Threads, whatever social media app that I simply have memory hold exists right now. You could follow them everywhere, talking all things Big 12. Please do subscribe to the 1012 podcast wherever you put podcasts in your ears. And of course, please do consider, if you're not one of the great ones that do already, supporting our show is little 16 cents a day. You go to patreon.com/SH podcast. You'll get access to, among other things, instant react episodes. Bobby, you did a great job as I was trying to navigate my way back from Lake Tahoe to where I live right now, jumping on there solo and talking about your most immediate thoughts in the UTSA game. Obviously, getting more than just Bobby for the remainder of the season to talk about Cougar football, and we'd love to have you there to do that. So little 16 cents a day, patreon.com/SHPAWDcast. Support our show, support independent weekly Houston Cougar coverage. And of course, got to talk about our good friends at Charlie Hustle, charliehustle.com, makers of incredibly comfortable vintage apparel, just the most comfortable t-shirts you were going to put on your person. And it was really cool today. We actually had a meeting with our friends at Charlie Hustle, some great stuff coming your way. That collection that they dropped back a month or so ago, fantastic, great. We are frequent wearers of it, the trio of us, but many more cool Cougar designs coming in your future. Has been really awesome. I think just candidly to partner with these guys, and I think they've been just incredibly impressed with how much Cougar fans like supporting our team here. So charliehustle.com, use our promo code SHP15, get 15% off your first order, and watch this space because there's a lot more cool Charlie Hustle stuff to come. So guys, we're finally here. Are you ready to talk about a real life Cougar football game?
Let's do it, boys.
Let's talk about the 1-0 Houston Cougars.
The 1-0 Houston Cougars. They don't count how you did. They just count that you did it. So kind of like we just started doing last season, we're going to talk about this first completed game of the football season, talk about how this one was ultimately won by the Cougars. We'll try to get through this quickly without breaking out my auctioneer voice. So for a game with not very much in the way of scoring, and I know that's a great and unique observation on my part, I would say this one was pretty eventful. Each team started out with 2 punts, not so eventful there. Nelson Caesar did have a nice highlight reel sack of Frank Harris on 3rd down to end the Roadrunners' second possession. Nice bull rush of the UTSA left tackle, did almost Superman leap into Frank Harris, one of the cool highlights of this one. But following UTSA's second possession, Malik Fleming had a nice returned the punt to the UTSA 22-yard line, the first of many big plays Fleming made Saturday night. Cougar offense did take advantage of that short field. Donovan Smith connects with Joseph Manjack IV for the first touchdown of the game, Smith's first touchdown pass as a Cougar. Smith also had a nice run, that little mini drive on 2nd and long to set the touchdown. Roadrunner offense responded on their next possession with an 8-play, 80-yard touchdown drive. A lot of chunk plays in the run game, ending in a 4-yard run by Kavorian Barnes. Immediately after, Cougar offense looked like they had a response to their own. Smith connected with Samuel Brown for a 47-yard gain. Cougars are deep in UTSA territory, but despite a nice run by Smith, setting the Cougars up back on schedule, Roadrunner D stuffed the Cougs on 4th and 1. Teams traded empty possessions. Cougars missed a long field goal. UTSA going to field goal of their own in there would be the final possession of either team. Frankly, it didn't look like the Cougs would have more than a Hail Mary throw on fourth down until just one of the most baffling, boneheaded plays you will see by any team that plays in TDECU Stadium. Danya Taylor of UTSA hits Donovan Smith as he's trying to run out of bounds and stop the clock. So there's time for one last Hail Mary. Half the distance to the goal. Jack Martin gets a chip shot field goal. Cougars go into the half, up 10-7. Really looked like UTSA had a chance to take over this game on the opening possession of the second half. Frank Harris and Kavorian Barnes both had long runs, but UTSA got off schedule in the Cougar red zone because of a false start. And on third and long, Traylon Payne intercepted Harris. Cougs would only succeed, though, in getting UTSA back deep in their territory. But on the first play of UTSA's next possession, Malik Fleming would intercept Harris while falling backwards at midfield. But unfortunately, the Cougars would fail to convert on fourth and short. At the UTSA 25 would turn that turnover into 0 points. But Fleming would intercept Harris on the second pass in a row. And for the Cougar defense, the third time in as many attempts by Harris. Fleming would return to the UTSA 35-yard line. Next possession appeared to end with a 45-yard made Jack Martin field goal, but another baffling boneheaded penalty by UTSA. Roadrunners had a man lined up on the snapper, which is not legal anymore. Cougs get the first down 3 plays later. Smith finds Matthew Golden on an end zone fade for a touchdown. Leads now 17-7 Cougars. Roadrunners go 3 and out early in the fourth. And I think at that point, the Cougars really had a chance to put this one on ice. Got multiple first downs, got the ball inside of UTSA's 40-yard line, but that drive stalled out on a bizarre third and long run call and lost 3 yards. Lane Wilkins has to go back out to punt. UTSA immediately gets the ball back, goes 15 plays, 94 yards, and with just over 5 minutes left in this one, guys really looked like the Roadrunners might come back and win this one. And it wasn't pretty or easy, but the Cougars did bleed about 3.5 minutes thanks to first down receptions from Joseph Manjack and a nice critical one from Michael Laughlin on third down. But the game was well and truly put to bed with a definitely not controversial run by Donovan Smith that was eventually ruled short, reviewed by the booth, and much to the consternation of Jeff Traylor and everyone at UTSA, was ruled. Donovan Smith gets the first down. Emphatic first down side by Dana Holgerson. 3 knees later, 17-14 Cougar final. Deep breath. Guys, I'm going to start this a bit different. I want each of y'all's overall thoughts about the game, like I usually would, but before you give your thoughts, I want you to say one nice thing about the Houston Cougar offense from this Saturday's game. Dustin?
Joseph Manjack had some nice catches and looks not too bad out there.
There we go.
I continue to like Joseph Manjack. I think the offseason hype was not completely unwarranted given what we saw on Saturday. You know, I thought it was funny. My kind of overall thought of the game was that the rollout of the Houston Oilers retro jerseys ended up being kind of a nice microcosm of the game because there was a lot to be really excited about, you know, and then there was something that makes, and there's the flip side that makes you just go, what are we doing here? Well, what's the thought process here? You know, in this analogy, the defense and the special teams, and even I would say the game day atmosphere in the crowd, which turned out pretty well, was the jerseys themselves, and then everything having to do with when Houston had the ball in its hands was the decision to not have any merch ready to go for sale when you announce those jerseys to much fanfare throughout the city of Houston, state of Texas, national college football media as a whole. But yeah, I mean, kind of like you said, it's, you know, like I said, Houston played really well on defense, played really dominated on special teams, played a relatively penalty-free game, which is something that we were just dying for after last season. Like I said, played in front of a mostly full and loud TDECU, and everything looked good apart from, the Cougar offense that looked, you know, whatever the opposite of dangerous is, and just looked so bad that it's kind of difficult to stay focused on everything that went well, because it's just like only 17 points scored. Both of your touchdowns came on possessions where Malik Fleming set you up deep inside of UTSA territory, first on a punt return, then on his second interception of the game. And the second one, like you mentioned, despite starting at the UTSA 35, still needed UTSA to commit a dumb procedure penalty on their field goal attempt to get a fresh set of downs, which was, you know, a 4-point swing in what ended up being a game that Houston won by 3 points. So, you know, we'll see. It's only one game, and it's game one for a lot of new pieces fitting together on that Cougar offense. So maybe we start to see things click going forward, and we all feel silly for being as down on the offense after one game as we are right now. You know, fingers crossed. Would love nothing more than that to happen, and for all of my worries about the Cougar offense to end up feeling very silly in retrospect. But I mean, that was kind of hard to watch at points on Saturday, especially the the all too familiar, just repeatedly running between the tackles when it's not working, not being able to get a yard or two on the ground when you need it. That was the talk all offseason was turning that around, and instead it just looked like more of the same with kind of a less experienced quarterback. So that's definitely or if you're going straight from Clayton Tune to Donovan Smith, who I think can be a good quarterback, but is probably not where Clayton was at the end of last season. If you're making that quarterback change and then there's no corresponding uptick in the run game, that's more than a little bit concerning.
Yeah, my nice thing to say about the offense is I thought Donovan Smith looked decent. I thought he looked about what I expected Donovan Smith to look like. I didn't expect Donovan Smith to come out here and throw the ball 60 times and complete 50 of those passes and just absolutely dominate through the air or anything like that. I think he showed he had some wheels. He did a lot with his legs on Saturday, and I thought he was pretty good. Did he make a couple of bad reads? And I think Holgorsen even mentioned that he missed a couple of reads, did that, but he protected the ball, no fumbles, no interceptions, 2 touchdowns. Like we said, it's on short fields, but overall, first game, new offense for him, all that being said, I thought he looked pretty good. I don't think he looked great, like the best quarterback ever, but I thought he looked decent. Overall, my big thought on the game, and Sam and I were texting about this, I think yesterday, was I just thought it was so meh. I didn't think anything was bad. I didn't think anything was good. There were some really bright spots to this offense or to this team. There were some that didn't look so great. I thought everything was just fine. I didn't think there was anything that upset me and made me go, what in the world are we doing here? It was just kind of whatever. I thought the offense between the 30 and the 30 looked decent, looked pretty good. But we just stalled out every time we hit the 30. And to be honest, they were effective moving the ball between the 30s, but that's what we had last year too, right? These first few games last year, I remember it was going 30 to 30 between those two. We would move the ball really well and we would stall out. And this wasn't any different. It was frustrating at times for sure, but I think the offense did some good stuff. I think the defense did a lot of good. That the first interception, like Sam mentioned, that followed a really bad defensive drive by the Cougs, right? You get the false start, puts them behind the chains, and the first interception kind of bails us out there.
Inflection point of the game right there, honestly.
Yeah. It's a huge point. And so I don't want to say, you see 3 interceptions and you're like, God, that's so amazing. But then you see how many yards UTSA gained. They outgained us that in a game in which we won, luckily. But the missed field goal that covered up another kind of bad drive for the Cougar defense. I don't think the Cougar defense was, if you kind of look at the interceptions and you want to get excited about them, I think that's great. But I don't think the defense was as mind-blowing as maybe the statistics would say, but I thought they were fine. I think the big summary of this game was that we didn't really answer a lot of questions. We didn't learn a ton about this team. They just looked fine. And the problem is, fine gets you to 4 wins this year in the Big 12.
If we get to 4 wins in the Big 12, I'm not throwing.
I meant 4 wins overall with some in the Big 12.
I don't know if this team's good enough to get past UTSA.
Did you see the rest of the Big 12 in week 1?
Fair point.
I don't look at this game. I'm like, oh yeah, now I'm booking my lodging for Arlington or anything like that. But
you can stay with me, buddy.
Exactly. Thank you. Am I like 20% more optimistic that we can get to the threshold of 6 wins though after that game? Yeah, I'd say so. I don't think 1 week should truly change anyone's feelings in the season, barring I think the most extreme outcomes. But I don't know. I will say also, I asked you to do this. I'm gonna do this as well. I thought Sam Brown did a really good job when Donovan Smith actually got him the ball in a good spot. I think he looks like a much better receiver, and I think I concur with you, Dustin, about Joseph Manjack. I think Matthew Golden, we actually got the ball his way, looked like the Matthew Golden we expected. So I think if the offense gets some other things figured out, which I think is definitely a big if at this point, but still a possibility, I don't think you're in a bad spot in terms of having 3 really promising sophomore receivers, not just for this year, but I would say for the medium-term future of this team. But I think what excited me most about this game, just from a big picture takeaway, is that U of H won this game by doing the things in the fine margins better. That's not something we saw this team do a lot this season or this time last year, right? I don't know why I can't get my words out there. I think your first touchdown could be, of course, very directly attributed to that awesome Malik Fleming punt return. Cougars did win the turnover battle 3-0, and I don't think we're especially lucky to have that margin. The Cougs were -5 in number of penalties, -39 in penalty yards, and I think most critically got 3 first downs off of Roadrunner penalties where the Cougars did not do any for the Roadrunners. I think you saw some of the things UTSA did, like that insanely boneheaded late hit that gave U of H an easy field goal in a low-scoring game that was won by the exact margin of that field goal. Those two instances, guys, felt like something last year's team would have done. That we'd be back here being like, oh my God, I cannot. I mean, we did.
We did that in a couple of games.
That really boneheaded roughing the punter against Texas Tech. Really nice Tank Dell return, just completely baffling, unnecessary stuff that cost you in a fine margin football game. The Cougars were notably not the team doing that, which I think I'm really excited about too. You saw subtle things also, like UTSA's kick returners repeatedly trying to take out kicks and not even getting close to the 25-yard line, something I thought last year's team did a lot that maybe might have escaped more obvious notice. You didn't see this team shooting themselves in the foot. You might have crews that are a bit more sticklery. You might get called for more penalties some weeks, but I thought the Cougars didn't give this crew any obvious stuff to call. Gave the crew a lot of judgment calls, which I think is good. You're going to have some crews are on the side of throwing a flag, and that's not a controllable variable, but the Cougars didn't obviously shoot themselves in the foot, and I think that's a big change from last year. And not saying it's a given, but I can believe an offense with a new quarterback, new O-line coach, new play caller, several new faces. I can believe they'll look more functional as the season goes on. But I think as you saw last year, being penalty prone, making bad on-field decisions, to me, that kind of feels like a more terminal problem for a team that's going to play a lot of close margin games like the Cougars are going to play in 2023. And it's a 1-week sample size, and I'm sure U of H will have worse games than this one in terms of penalties, in terms of turnovers, whatnot. But this week was A+ for discipline, and doing the right things in the fine margins. That's something that could stay with you, and that's something that could be the difference between this team being a 4-5 win team or this team being a 6, 7, or 8 win team, which I think is where we'd like to see this team when it's all said and done.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. That cost us a lot last year. I mean, I can't think of any instances off the top of my head. I'm sure
because you've blocked them all of your mind.
I've tried that, and just genuine. Like, I can't just recall plays from last year off the top of my head, just quick like that. But like, there were definitely times where we had just dumb penalties where what was it? I think week 1 versus UTSA, we had a ton of penalties just off the top of my head. We had just penalties that cost us. And I think you're exactly right, Sam. Going into these close margin games like we're going to play this year, that is going to be the difference between a win and a loss in a lot of situations.
Yeah, I think even if, Bob, you say, I wasn't that impressed with the offense or the defense, I think the things you have to say were much better than was the execution, like Sam said. Yep. And also the special teams. I mean, you not only did you have the Malik Fleming punt return that set up the Cougar touchdown, Houston had the clearly superior Aussie punter between the two with Lane Wilson.
That's right.
Just under 44-yard average punt, 3 of his 5 punts down inside the 20. Jack Martin missed the ambitious 51-yard field goal, but looked solid on the 31-yarder. And kind of like you mentioned, Sam, then kickoffs, UTSA was content to just put it through the back of the end zone, and Houston was more than happy to take it to the 25. But it looked like a strategic thing that Houston said, hey, we're going to kind of, put a little air under it, try to land it inside the 5 or 10 and feel like we can get down there and coverage you inside the 25. And they did. For the 3 times they did that, UTSA started with the ball at the 20, the 16, and the 3. Obviously, the 3, that was kind of another UTSA mental mistake where the guy kind of fumbled it and thought he could still take a knee and get the 25 yards, I think, but then got down to the 3-yard line. So, I mean, and even with the defense, you talk about the interceptions, but the thing that I would say is that, Frank Harris, only once in his career prior had he ever thrown 3 interceptions. But even if you put those aside, holding him to 209 yards on 36 pass attempts, that's less than 6 yards per pass attempt. If you had told me before the game Houston's going to hold Frank Harris to less than 6 yards per pass attempt and have 0 picks, I'd be like, yeah, I'll take that. That's a pretty strong defensive performance. So I think holding it, obviously they helped you out with some mental mistakes and stuff, but I think holding a strong offensive team under, to 14 points, I think is pretty solid. And I don't know, my only tongue in cheek last thought in the game is that maybe it's just for the best that Houston's offense came out so sluggish to start the year, because it did seem like everything else went pretty well. The rest of the Texas teams in the Big 12 looked so vulnerable in week 1. The U of H hype might be too much too soon if the Cougars had also played even like a B- offensive game and won 31-14 or something like that. So, just let it be a slow build, I guess. Let it be a slow build. We'll beat Rice, and then we'll see how we do against TCU and go from there, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I thought the pass defense really excited me. I mean, we saw how bad this pass defense was last year. We lived it. We'd prefer to think about it much less. And this was a scary matchup in week 1. Not that we didn't like on paper what the new faces were bringing to the secondary, but you had never seen guys like Malik Fleming, AJ Halsey, Brian George, Isaiah Hamilton ever play in a Cougar game. So could be great. Could be a pass defense that holds Frank Harris to one of his worst games of his career, but could also be, we've seen times where promising transfers just unfortunately didn't pan out at this program in this system at this time. So didn't take that as a given. It almost felt like kind of a nightmare match when we previewed this game, that you were going to have such a new secondary getting broken in against 7th-year Frank Harris, a guy who's multiple years proven to be a high-level Division I passer. And I thought it was a torture test for the defense at large for dealing with a mobile quarterback, even with the injury offseason that Harris had. You can tell the guy isn't 100% back to his old self yet, but he's still on the very, very high end of mobile quarterbacks that U of H is going to see in the 2023 regular season. I'm glad we got to see this test week 1. I'm glad we got to see what these guys do against one of the most veteran signal callers that you can find in Division I FBS. Just go back to the offense a little bit. I think my last really thoughts on the offense. I mean, the results speak for themselves. 17 points in 12 possessions, though. To be fair, that 12th possession was you successfully running out the clock to end the game. No touchdown drives longer than 35 yards. A running game that didn't look better than what you saw last year. Its worst moments really did not answer any of the questions that you would have hoped to have answered. I think that was the unit I highlighted. It was the Cougar offensive line against the UTSA defensive front, and said it myself on this show that we have to start asking questions and worrying if the Cougar defensive front can't run the ball against UTSA. They could not run the ball against UTSA. I thought when Stacey Sneed and Tony Mathis Jr., the rare times they actually got a decent hole, they looked pretty good.
Yeah,
but those were rare times that they actually got a chance to run in anything that looked like a decent hole. I thought, again, when Samuel Brown, Joseph Manjack, and Matthew Golden got the ball in the right spot, those guys look like good receivers, but you got to have the blocking, giving Donovan Smith time. I thought Donovan Smith, again, not a perfect outing. I would concur with most of what Bobby said, not a spectacular outing, but didn't contribute to you losing the game necessarily. I thought he did good stuff with his legs when he had to improvise or when the staff called designed runs, but not really adequate run blocking, not really adequate pass blocking. That can get better, but there's no guarantee it necessarily does, which is kind of the concerning thing. But I guess if it had to be one of the sides of the ball in terms of, I guess, struggling, if we were going to win this game but come out with serious questions, I think I would rather it be the offense, just because if this was a defense that looked similar to last year, I mean, it's going to be a really stressful Big 12 season. You're going to just get lit up week after week. And as we saw last year, even with a great offense, that can only take you so far. So would prefer if we didn't have the level of offensive questions that we did have, but I guess if it has to be one side of the ball, it's the one with a new quarterback and a lot of new key decision makers and key players as well.
Yeah. And like my final thought on the defense was Doug Belk, in the years that we've had him, has very much been a bend don't break kind of defense. Last year we broke a lot, but that seems to have been kind of the general thing we've been going for, is we'll give up yards, but we won't give up a ton of points. And, that really is how Saturday felt, right? We gave up a bunch of yards. If you look at the stats, you gave up a bunch of yards, but you only gave up 14 points, and you had some key turnovers when you needed those key turnovers as well. So, it's not that I thought the defense looked horrible or anything like that. I thought it had really good moments. I thought it had some really bad moments, right? The first touchdown drive by UTSA was just bad. They just got big chunk plays, 10, 12, 17. Like, it was just one of those where it just felt inevitable that they were going to score. So I think holding UTSA to, their passing offense to what we did is commendable, but I don't want to say immediately that I was just like, oh my God, our defense was incredible. Like, there were a lot of things that I didn't that I would have liked to have seen a little bit more of. But again, I think the defense had high points, and I think it may have had some low points as well. Same with the offense. The other thing that I really liked about it as well is we didn't give up those big. I think we had one big play go against us, like plus 30 yards there, and it was a kind of a jump ball that they threw up there, and we just got beat for it.
It was towards the student section, right?
Yeah, and
it was Brian George was on coverage. Yeah.
Yep, and it was didn't give up that explosive play, and I don't remember exactly last year, but it felt like we gave up those big chunk plays a lot last year.
I was going to add quick impromptu trivia. Guys, do you know how many passes the UH defense intercepted the entirety of last season, including the bowl game?
I want to say it was like 6 or 7 or something.
Bobby?
That was going to be my answer, was 6 or 7. So I'll go 7 or 8.
You guys are both half right. It was 7. I don't know. I was going to say, I feel pretty good having 3 picks.
We got it together.
3 picks in week 1 when you managed 7 the entirety of last season. Ironically enough, 3 of those last year came in against Donovan Smith and Texas Tech, but nothing really relevant there. I was going to say, do we have any more of the on-field stuff? Because I have some last thoughts, but it's quick and it does not relate directly to the game.
Go for it.
Go.
Guys, am I being truthful in saying this was a bigger game for the UTSA fan base than U of H?
Yes.
Yes.
Because it fills my evil little Grinch heart with joy that UTSA lost this game for the second year in a row, and lost it for the second year in a row in an extremely frustrating way. And, you know, it's kind of annoying that UTSA can say they won the stadium opener in 2014, but I think it says something about these program stature that 2014 is UTSA's biggest ever program win, and for the 3 of us, it's just a footnote in a series where the Cougars lead 3-1 all time. And almost a decade doing this pod, I think we've encountered some chirpy opposing fan bases, but I don't know if there are any more than the Roadrunners. And I kind of enjoy it to some degree, but maybe that has me crowing a bit more than I would usually in this spot. And also, I would just say this, Jeff Traylor, after this 2-game series, I'm not as wild about him as, oh, this guy's going to be the next great head coach whenever he gets the next great opportunity, because we've seen them 2 years in a row against us cost themselves a potential win by just doing incredibly stupid, undisciplined stuff. And just still days later, I know he was asked about it. Still days later, crying about that Donovan Smith run isn't unbecoming of fans, because I think we would be crying about it days later, but I think it's extremely unbecoming of a guy who supposedly is great head coach. For as much as they advertise themselves as a toughness program, we got our big triangle of toughness patches on our coaches' polos, and it's just all about toughness and doing the whole stomping on the field thing pregame. I don't care how heated the game was. I never, ever, ever want to see U of H players doing that at an opposing stadium. You're just giving your opponent free, easy motivation, and not the kind of stuff you'd expect from a program that advertises its toughness and discipline and its triangles and its area code and all that stuff. So again, very happy we got here. Not a guarantee we're going to get to 6 wins as a result, but I feel like that was a tough game for that kind of march to 6 wins on the season. Happy it was a victory and that we can just hopefully be rid of UTSA fans for a few years, even though I may want the series to continue, but frankly, just very satisfying to go 2-0 in this most recent little home and home.
You know, I was gonna let some of that go, but since we're going down that road,
don't let it go. Hold it in. Be petty.
No, it was funny. Like, I remember, like, a week before the game, like last Saturday, I remember thinking, like, I'd like to win. Yeah, obviously you want to win every game, but like as games go, and the Alamo guys even kind of asked us, like, oh, how big is the UTSA game? I'm like, I don't know. I don't think it's that big of a game, because I think it'll be close, whether it's close when we win or close when we lose. Like, the more important thing to everybody, I think, is going to be, how do we look in the Big 12 this year and stuff? And like, okay, we got you guys last year, so if you get us this year, it's not as. And there was I think I mentioned in the preview, it scared me genuinely, the fact that it just seemed like UTSA had more to, had more fire in its belly or whatever, more on this game than Houston did necessarily. And I think, honestly, the jerseys made me feel a little bit better, because I was like, oh, okay, well, no, they're going to be jacked up to play in those jerseys. But like the stomping on the midfield logo beforehand, I'm like, okay. And then just like a couple of little things, and it was maybe just because my seats were like right on the cusp of like where, to my left was almost a majority U of H fans, to my right was like majority UTSA fans in the section that I was in. So I was a little bit like, right there next to them more than I wanted to be. Like, when our players came out of the tunnel, like en masse, they booed. I've been a part of a lot of away contingents. Never has it occurred to me to just boo the home team coming out of the tunnel. Like, that seems very like petty and small to me. And then like at one point, a U of H player is injured on the field and they all started doing the UTSA thing. I like loudly was like, hey man, have some, effing class. Like, there's an injured player on the field. Don't start doing your stupid chant right now. Like, grow up, guys. And just by the end of the game, I was like, I want to beat these little fuckers. Like, I'm tired of them. I no longer think they're this cute, fun story of like, and no offense to like our friends at Alamo Audible, who we enjoyed having on, who are great guys who, we liked hanging out with and, whatever. But just like by the end of the game, I was like, all right, no, I want to beat these guys. I'm a little angry we didn't beat them a little bit more. But kind of like you said, just the fact that for 2 years in a row, they're going to be going home crying about the calls or whatever is kind of beautiful in its own right.
It's almost more satisfying than beating him by a lot, to beat him in just the most painful way possible. Sorry, Bobby.
It's like the Don Draper from Mad Men when she's like, I feel bad for you. And he's like, I don't even think about you at all. Again, I have said this for weeks going into this game. We've had these conversations. I said it with the Alamo guys, the Alamo Audible guys. Just, it feels like us with Texas Tech, like when we were students back in like the 2009 game. Like, we cared a lot about that game. Like, we camped out for that game, and Tech was like,
sure did.
It'd be kind of nice to win this game, but whatever. And it was our Super Bowl. We lost our minds for that game. We cared more about that game than we did Oklahoma State for some reason as fans. So but then if you actually look at since that game, Tech has kind of owned us. Right?
No, kind of, Bobby. They've beaten us every single time.
Okay. Exactly.
Most of the time it's pretty painful.
So it's just like, oh, okay. And they're I'm seeing we're better than you, and there's nothing you can do about it. And you can get as hype as you want to for this game. You can complain about anything that you want to. You can put all the little triangle patches on your shoulder, and your coach can pump in all the sound that he wants to into your home stadium. We're better than you, and there's nothing you can do about it.
I hadn't thought about the parallels between the 2009 Tech game at Robertson and the stadium opener in 2014, but honestly, I could see it, and I may not have been able to see it before you drew that comparison there.
All right, guys. Well, I know before we move on from this game, though, definitely going to do some 4-word reviews. Are we ready to jump into those?
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
All right. Unsurprisingly, a number of you were interested in Malik Fleming in the aftermath of this. Our friend and patron Sean had me liking Malik Fleming. Chris and Travis had similar ones with Malik Fleming is him and Malik, he is him. And then Christian, really just taking all the subtlety out of it, just went for Malik Fleming. And then a lot of our friends were also thinking about the conference as a whole. Our friends at the 10-12 pod had Big 12's best win.
That's right.
Let's go, boys.
Friend of the pod, Bill, had inaugural win in B12. And then Coug 57 had ugly, but not Baylor.
A lot of y'all weren't super stoked about the offense either, understandably so. Renee had, please, sir, better offense. The British orphan voice was my creative license. Garrett had defense good, offense bad. Jacob had improved defense, offensively challenged. Latanya had one, I really, really feel this one. Got to capitalize on turnovers. Steven had ground pound, not effective. And maybe my favorite from this group, Chris had offense is very offensive, but many of you are also very excited about the defense. Rev Coug had Doug Belk - Houston Redemption. Hoop and Holler had Nelson Caesar, the new CEO. Sam, but not me, had secondaries much improved. Death Before Decab had Third Ward D back ? And Chuck had Walking Down Interception Avenue.
And some of y'all are just excited to win. I did have the Doug Belk Houston Redemption one from Mr. Rev Coug down.
We also have a basketball crossover here.
Another great one from Sean, patron Sean, Chains for the Win. And then I also have Dan Brooks 95 with Did Enough to Win. Like Sam said earlier, doesn't matter what it looks like, you're 1-0 on the in the standings. You're 1-0, baby.
My 2 more I'm going to close with here. Our friend Parker from Locked On Cougs had gave UTSA the blues. You do a good pun. I'm going to always throw that one out.
Always getting on there.
And then my other favorite one, I don't know why this is my other favorite one, but it definitely was the Spirit of Houston just tweeted.
The Spirit of
The last one I had was from Chris Rocha with the upside down font that had turned my phone over to read. He had turned meep to weep. And that is my last forward review. I think we got 100 of them for this episode. So great early response, y'all.
And I think I even tweeted at you guys at the pod account, and I said more like weep weep. Am I right?
Good job, Bobby.
And I just see you guys shaking your heads. Like I knew you both got the notification and we're just like, oh God.
I was in a car going back to where I live at the time. I'm sure I wished I didn't have service right at that exact moment. But let's get to the Big 12, fellas. There was a eventful first week for the Big 12. Who wants to lead us off with their show and tell of how their teams did?
I'll go first. This one doesn't really count since we played all FCS teams. So we'll get the games that barely count out of the way first. So I said last week I wasn't sure if all four of my teams were going to beat their FCS opponents, and they all did. Not only that, wildly enough, every FBS team that played an FCS team in week 1 won, which never happens. I need someone to find the last time that happened, but
Rhode Island got close, but yeah.
Yeah, there was a couple ones that got close, but everyone took care of business eventually. Kansas, the big news was star quarterback Jalen Daniels didn't play due to back tightness. Nothing official, but it sure sounds like he's going to be all right going forward. Jayhawks fortunately have a pretty solid backup in Jason Bean, pretty veteran quarterback that's taken a lot of snaps, and he took care of business. And even against a defensively inclined FCS team in Missouri State, they won 48-17. My Cyclones rolled with redshirt freshman Rocco Brecht at quarterback. They got a pick 6 early to set the tone against Northern Iowa, led 23-0 at halftime, put it in cruise control, won 30-9. And like I said, that's a game that always seems to be obnoxiously close. And, as up in the air as everything with Iowa State has been with a gambling probe going on, I think you're not going to find any Big 12 fan bases happier with their FCS win probably than Iowa State should well be. But another one that's pretty happy is Cincinnati, just because they beat the crap out of Eastern Kentucky, and actually a pretty respectable FCS team, beat them 66-13. So even against level of competition, it feels like a pretty good result for the Bearcats. Transfer quarterback Emory Jones looked as good as one can look against an FCS team, had more touchdown passes than incompletions. 5 touchdowns, 19 of 23 for 345 yards, and ran for 2 more touchdowns for good measure. So was responsible for 7, which is not a bad way to introduce yourself to a new fan base. And then, of course, Oklahoma State, the one team that last week I said I was happy with them for scheduling a mediocre FCS team that shouldn't get them any trouble. That was, of course, the team that had the most trouble with their FCS team. They were only ahead 13-7 going into the fourth quarter before finally pulling it out 27-13. I mentioned in my preseason preview that I wasn't super sold on Alan Bowman being the answer at quarterback, and he was a pretty woeful 13 of 24 for 80 yards. That is 3.3 yards per pass attempt against a mediocre FCS team. They brought in redshirt freshman Garrett Rangel at quarterback. He looked fine. Mike Gundy's walk-on quarterback son, Gunnar Gundy, 8+ name, by the way, also came in. He also looked fine. So, I don't know. It's just, I was already pretty shaky on Oklahoma State, and this is a game where they didn't look dominant on either side of the ball against an FCS team that I was just patting them on the back for scheduling because they are sucky. So not the best result, but all in all, I'm happy that all 4 of my teams were able to take care of business, I guess.
I would call that a downright O'Korn-esque 3.4 yards per pass attempt to do a callback to a Cougar of years past. Bobby, I heard there was a big interception
from another quarterback who spent some time at Michigan. In fact,
of course, yeah, I was about to say. Michigan and was not very good in the Division I level. Bobby, I heard a big upset happened among the teams that you were following this year.
It did. Okay. So we'll start with UCF, not the upset. UCF took care of Kent State 56-6. One thing I didn't realize till I was kind of watching some highlights of this game was that Kent State returned 4 starters, not offensive, not defensive, 4 starters throughout their entire team, including nobody on the offense, I believe. So not really a surprise that UCF took care of business there. They had a ton of explosive plays. Not many takeaways from the game. The biggest concern for UCF fans has got to be, if you're trying to nitpick anything from this game, is that Plumlee did have 2 interceptions. So, when you're throwing 2 interceptions to Kent State in a 56-6 blowout, causes a little bit of concern, but the
biggest concern with UCF from that game is their social media person who made a national.
Oh God!
Oh yeah, that wasn't great.
I know it's 54 years ago, but there is still a too soon.
Yeah, not a great look there. But that is kind of the biggest takeaway you can go from the UCF game if you are just trying to look ahead. Two interceptions versus Kent State, not great. So the next one I went to was TCU. TCU took on Colorado and let's be honest, did not look great. 45-42, great back and forth game. One that was super fun to watch. I was unfortunately working, but I had a game cast up, and it was of the furniture space in Dallas Fort Worth. It was a really exciting game. Shakur Sanders goes 38-47 for 510 yards, sets the school record. And he may not have been the best player on that field, right? Travis Hunter just absolutely plays two ways. It was hotter than hot on Saturday. Two ways. I think somebody did the math. I can't remember who on Twitter did the math, but he played more plays than the average NFL team plays in an entire game, offense and defense. And he did it outdoors in that 110-degree heat. You got two of the top Heisman guys, two guys who could be contending for the Heisman at the end of the year on one team. That being said, though, I don't really know if it's as big of an upset as we may think. I think Colorado is probably better than we all expected, and probably not as good as we expected, to be honest. They lost a lot from that team. One of the big in the preseason preview of the Big 12, one of the things I said is, can Chandler Morris replace at least a little bit of Max Duggan? Going 24-42, 279 with 2 interceptions and 2 touchdowns. It's going to be tough to kind of come back from that, and yeah, we'll see how TCU does this year. I know they still return a lot from that team, but we all know quarterback's the most important position on the field, and when you lose a Heisman contender, so it's going to be really interesting going forward for them. And then there was one other team that I have. Oh, Baylor. That's right.
Did Baylor play this weekend?
Yeah, Baylor played somebody this weekend. Baylor played Texas
your
State.
Hometown team.
I guess so. Yeah. I feel dirty for even doing that. I didn't even preview this one last week. I was like, what a stupid game to even watch. It's going to be a blowout. But it wasn't, and it should have been. But Baylor didn't even look to be in this game at any point. At no point watching this game, I had Gamecast up because the Cougs were on at the same time, and I saw a little rumbling that Baylor was losing, and I was like, that'll be interesting. And then they never had the lead in the game. They never got it closer than 8, really. Once Texas State kind of pulled away, and it was just an absolute rout by Texas State, and Texas State gets their first ever P5 win. So good for Texas State. It's interesting what they're doing down there, kind of doing what Dion did on a smaller level. So it's I think the score of that game makes that game look even closer than it was. So Sam, what about you, bud?
I was just gonna say to your games quickly, something you actually said that Baylor preview, I think really bit the Bears in the butt in this one, that you mentioned when we previewed them that they were basically turning over their entire offensive line. And you saw at times Blake Shapen, although apparently he's going to be out this coming week, make some plays before he ended up getting hurt and going out for Sawyer Robinson. But it just shows you can only do so much with an offensive line. I was going to say at the TCU game, I almost think the 45-42 score flattered TCU. I really do think Colorado was that much the better team. And I think you saw why the Kendall Browse offense, for as much flash and as much points as it can put up, it's not the best offensive system. I got to rewatch this one. Like you, Bobby, was occupied and not able to watch it in real time. But I think it was the last pick Chandler Morris threw, and they were running the ball great. And I think it was 3rd and goal, not a goal line situation, but it could have been a running situation that Chandler Morris in that situation threw a fade short of the sticks, and Travis Hunter picked it. And it's just that's the most Kendall Browse offense shit. Just it can do great and spectacular things. You're going to look at a box score and there's going to be a lot of yards and there's going to be generally a lot of points, but the tempo is bad. The tempo just absolutely kills your defense. It killed TCU's defense on Saturday. And it's not going to get you the yards you need when you need it. Granted, U of H's offense currently isn't the best at doing that, but it's just,
heavy bet kettle.
Yeah, exactly. It's just it's a lot of flash, and it felt like a worse offense than the one we saw be really good for them last year. So I will start with my FCS team or FCS opponent. K-State played Southeast Missouri. Not going to talk about that too much because I think there's basically nothing you can glean meaningful from this game other than you got a brief look at K-State's quarterback of the future, Avery Johnson, consensus national top 100 recruit who is beyond anything they've ever gotten at quarterback position before, did rush for the game's final score in a 45-0 win. Going to talk about one of the more exciting and bizarre Big 12 games. Texas Tech going to Laramie, Wyoming, and losing that one in double overtime. Red Raiders actually at the start of this one looked like they had it in control. They took a 17-0 lead after the first. They got those last 10 points off Wyoming turnovers, but you didn't see Wyoming panic. They cut the lead to 1 score by halftime with 5:37 left in the third. Marched down the field on a 13-play touchdown drive, completely erased that 17-point deficit to tie the game. And just after going up 17-0, the Red Raider offense really was having a nightmare of a time. They had possessions after going up 17-0 that resulted in the following: interception, punt, missed 49-yard field goal, punt, blocked 40-yard field goal, missed 50-yard field goal, and finally, on the last possession in regulation, they did make a 27-yard field goal to send the game to overtime, tied at 20. The teams would trade touchdowns in the first OT. Tech got the ball first in the second OT, but weren't able to get the required 2-point conversion after their touchdown. Wyoming gets the ball back. Cowboy quarterback Andrew Peasley drops back and just gets leveled by a blitzing Tech linebacker. Somehow gets the ball out in a spot to where his tight end, John Michael Gellenborg, can grab it. He runs in almost in touch for the score. We're tied at 33. Wyoming ultimately wins the game on a remarkably simple-looking halfback off tackle by Sam Scott to give the Cowboys the win. Crowd streams on the field in Laramie, celebrates a massive win for that program. Mentioned that quarterback a second ago, Andrew Peasley. If you didn't watch this game, if you just looked at the box score, you would just see a guy who completed just over half his passes for 149 yards, but made so many timely plays with his feet. Seemingly every time the Cowboys needed a big play, he was there. Peasley was always able to find his tight end seemingly on third down, popped right back up, just seemed to take hit after hit after hit from the Texas Tech defense. It seemed like he got stronger every time they just walloped him. He kind of gave me a great value Baker Mayfield kind of feel out there, just a kind of a short white guy who's just getting leveled out there, but just keeps talking yes and keeps making big plays at the big time. It was pretty fun. And I think a lot of Red Raider fans are feeling a crash right now from what were just very lofty preseason expectations, losing to Wyoming as a double-digit favorite. Believe it or not, I still think this can be an 8 or 9 win team, but maybe not a Big 12 contender just yet. Not a great sign of Tech loss this one, but I do think the challenge of playing in Laramie might be getting undersold. And week 1 is always the college football week with the most volatile results. I'm not selling all my Red Raider stock just yet. The team I might be selling stock on, though, is my third team, the BYU Cougars. I think one of the scarier results is BYU only managing 14 points. And this is notable, guys. Their fewest total yards in an opener since they played number 1 Florida State in 2000 against Sam Houston, a team playing their first ever, or the first ever FBS game. I think
my cousin was on that 2000 Florida State team, by the way. Kind of just a little side note there. Kind of fun.
They did pretty well against BYU. They did as well against BYU as Sam Houston State. Apparently, I know Kalani Sitake, their head coach, said like, "Oh, Sam Houston's defense is great." I'm not here to talk about Sam Houston's defense, but I'm sorry, man. You should be doing a little bit better against Sam Houston State than you did historically against one of the greatest FSU teams of all time. But Keaton Slovis, 0 touchdown passes, only 4.4 yards per pass attempt. The run game was anemic throughout this one. Credit to the BYU defense, though. Even though Sam is expected to be one of the worst teams in FBS offensively, this was their first shutout of any kind since 2014. And this was a defense with a lot of questions and a lot of new faces. So not the toughest competition, but you can at least take something nice out of this one on the Cougar defensive side of the ball. And for my last one, West Virginia, I think their trip to Penn State, losing 38-15, I think my takeaway from that one is it could have been worse. I don't think it was especially good. Neil Brown tried to keep it a secret till kickoff, but Garrett Green was their starting quarterback. I think had a pretty encouraging performance. He didn't turn the ball over, along with running back CJ Donaldson. I think made things happen in the run game. I think it bodes well for the Mountaineer run game that they actually made some things happen against a defense that is going to be more challenging than anything they'll probably see in Big 12 play. But I think the downside is West Virginia was fortunate to only allow 38 points, and Penn State quarterback Drew Aller had 325 pass yards, over 11 yards per pass attempt. I know it's a challenging opponent, but not much evidence that West Virginia's defense is going to be any better than bad. I think the real important test is going to be that backyard brawl 2 weeks from now. I think this isn't going to be anything but a loss, but probably not going to get you any more positivity in Morgantown. That is all I have for my Big 12 teams this week, guys.
All right. I was going to say, we were going to have, I guess, one other game, but we can kind of rush through that. But I think the most fun non-Big 12 game was actually waited until Monday when Duke smacked around number 9 Clemson 28-7. Was 7-6 Clemson at the half. Duke broke the big 44-yard rush touchdown early in the fourth quarter and then salted it away. Held Clemson's QB to 209 yards on 43 attempts, and then saw a nice win for future Big 12 program Utah over Florida. And our old friends, the Greenies, Tulane looked really good, I thought, in beating South Alabama by 3 scores.
I was going to say, Tulane's quarterback put up some video game on very easy numbers. Did. It was like, I think he had like one or two incompletions, like 14, 15 yards per pass. Against a good opponent, against a team that almost won the Sun Belt last year. So not like they went out and did that against an FCS team. I think you haven't seen any evidence so far this Tulane team isn't going to be one of the very best of Group of 5. We'll say my pick of the week was Washington, Boise State. Not a very good game, but I will say the Washington offense will be worth at least tuning over. If you need something on your second screen, I think Michael Penix Jr. their offense is going to be quite fun. And like you, Dustin, very much enjoyed Dabo just getting smacked around in Durham against the Blue Devils.
Yeah, that's where I was too, is that Clemson Duke game. That was a lot of fun to watch, as much as I hate to say it. I don't have a ton to add to y'all's thoughts on week 1.
Yeah, it's pretty good week. We don't have time to talk about all the games from it, but I think for a week where a lot of teams schedule not the best opponents, I think we actually got a pretty good week on the whole of college football.
I agree.
All right, and then turning to week 2, you probably know by now, but the Cougars will be facing their crosstown rivals, the Rice Owls, this week. I'm sure you remember last year when the Cougs got an uncomfortably close game at TDECU Stadium against Rice, but ultimately came away with their 7th straight Bayou Bucket victory, the new longest win streak in Bayou Bucket history. The win pushed Houston's all-time lead over Rice to 33-11. The Owls coming off of a 5-win season in which they were nonetheless somehow selected for a bowl game, I guess because they did good at grades, so that means that they got to go to a bowl game as a 5-win team.
Is that the most Rice shit imaginable?
That is the most Rice shit I can possibly.
No, the most Rice shit is when you walk into their basketball arena and instead of retired numbers, they have people who won Nobel Prizes.
Fair.
That is also some extremely Rice shit. Yeah. There's no wrong answers here. Either way, coming off of a 5-win season, which I guess kind of counts as steady improvement because now under Mike Bloomgren's tenure, they've won 2, 3, 2, 4, and now 5 games. And apparently having your best season be going 5-8 in year 5, that's enough to get you a year 6 when you're at Rice. So we've got more intellectual brutality coming back this year. And, you know, kind of an interesting result in week 1 versus UT. They kind of, I think, maybe did a little bit more offensively defensively, I should say, against the Longhorns than we were expecting for a team that was, I believe, 120th in SB Plus defensively last year, but then just really nothing approaching an offense, even under 14th year quarterback JT Daniels, who is now on his 8th different team. I'm pretty sure those numbers are accurate. So I don't know. The line is that was 10 for this one, guys. That feels like maybe a little bit disrespectful for Houston, given what Rice is. Am I wrong on that one?
I know where Bobby is because we had a text exchange about this when I saw the opening line. I ended up maybe placing a few simoleons on it at a legal establishment, but I am very much with you. And SP Plus has that 19.5 point line. I'm not saying U of H should be a 30-point favorite in this one. I think that offense should definitely not support that kind of line. But yeah, I'm with you, Dustin. I'm interested to hear your counter argument, Bobby, but I think this should be closer to 19 than where it is right now.
Again, I think we are better than Rice, but nothing how they looked versus Texas defensively, especially in the first half, only giving up 1 touchdown, giving up 16 points total, holding them to 3 field goals. To me, it's not that I don't see our defense holding them. It's that I don't know if our offense is going to generate enough points to even warrant a spread at 19, right? I think 10, I could see us going out there, scoring 24 and giving up giving up 14, right? I could definitely see that. I don't see us scoring 45 points and then holding them to a really small number. I don't see us going out and scoring enough points to justify a 19-point spread, right? As SP Plus did. I really, between how good their defense looked and how anemic our offense looked at times, I don't know if Texas in the first half couldn't finish drives against Rice. What makes me think that our offense can finish drives against Rice throughout an entire game?
I mean, I will say, I think it's hard to figure out what Rice is based on 1 week of on-field play, and that week, 1 week being instant opponent where I don't think anyone really expected that much in terms of them being that competitive. And like you said, Bobby, they did a good job. It's not just, oh, you get up 16 points, but the eye test will tell you something different. No, the eye test will tell you that Rice was beating Texas up front way, way, way more often that first half than you'd expect Rice to beat Texas up front. Pretty impressive, some of the things they were able to do. And again, at the risk of sounding condescending, I think covering the spread on the road against this level of opponent, I think qualifies as at least somewhat of a positive for Rice. I think I'm very much of two minds about that team. I thought their defense was really impressive, like we've said in Austin, and that they have experience at all levels. But that offense, even with some veteran guys like Luke McCaffrey and JT Daniels, I think that's a really bad offense. I think that's a drastically worse offense than the UTSA one that we just saw come into TD2 Stadium. And definitely don't think it's a good enough or as good of a team overall as the Roadrunners. But I will agree with some of what you said, Bobby. I don't think we saw enough from the Cougar offense in week 1 to feel really confident this will be a blowout or anything like that. I don't know. I think with Mike Bloomgren, he's someone I'm very on the record as not thinking much of, but I do think the Cougars have to improve in some key areas from week 1 for this not to be another kind of sweat it out more than you'd like against Rice kind of win, honestly.
Yeah, I think taking us into kind of our matchups to watch, I think that's kind of, you guys are leading into my matchup to watch, which is the Houston offensive line against the Rice defensive front. I mean, just because this is, I think before seeing Rice play against UT, you'd have gone, okay, well, if we can't run it against Rice, then, who are we going to, but, like I said, we just watched them do a pretty respectable job in the trenches against the Longhorns. And you saw Houston not exactly have any success running the ball, in between the tackles against the other Roadrunners. So yeah, I think it is notable, kind of like you said, Sam, that it is a 1-game sample size. And I think, the people who professionally make predictions don't, like I looked at just while we were talking, I looked up the post week 1. This is so after week 1, SP Plus rankings, Rice, according to SP Plus, the 124th best defense in the country. So, maybe, you go, okay, the eye test says that they're a little bit better than that. They'll probably bring that number up over the course of the season. Is this probably 1 game, a sample size notwithstanding, probably actually going to play out to be an above average defense over the course of the year? I think my money's probably still on no. Like, just the eye test can show you a lot of funny things in week 1 that don't end up being validated. And I think it's a lot easier to believe that they kind of regress to where they were last year. And I think, but I mean, like I said, I don't feel nearly as confident as I did, probably if you would ask me before the season starts, hey, how's Houston going to do, in the line play, offensively against the Rice defensive front, I think will probably be okay. But like I said, neither week 1 result was really encouraging to the point where I think that's a lot more of a question mark than it was maybe, at least in my mind, previously.
Yeah, my whole thing with SP Plus this early though is right. We have the 39th ranked offense in SP Plus.
Yeah, it's still 3/4 weighted on last year. It's still.
Yeah. But I think that's valid. I think we might have the 39th best offense. So I think that's entirely possible. Our offense looks a lot better than it did the rest of the year. I think that's why in the same way, you don't overreact to one game sample sizes either way.
Right. And I mean, our defense was 71st. And so I think this early for me, SP Plus is a little bit. My matchup to watch is Holgo versus himself. He had some interesting quotes this week about the offense, right? Sam sent them to me, and it was he had that quote where he said last year we didn't know that we were an air raid offense until 5 games in, and it's like, hey buddy, we're in a different league now. We can't be waiting 5 games for you to figure out what our offense is, right? Are we this run dominated offense, anything like that? Like, can he figure out what we are this week? Can he take the next step in figuring out what our offense is? And that's why I say it's him versus himself, because if he goes out, he starts questioning things. He's trying a bunch of random things against Rice. Next thing you know, you throw an interception and this game's a lot closer than you want it to be. So that's why I have that as my matchup. It's a little out of the box. It's not like, our quarterback versus their secondary or anything like that, but it's definitely, can Holgorsen figure out what we're doing? And I think that kind of goes big picture with U of H football right now. What is our identity as a program, right? Like Holgorsen, when you see somebody say that, like, oh, we don't know what kind of offense we are, there aren't a lot of teams that do that. Most people know this is our system. This is what we run, and we recruit to this. And you would really hope that Holgorsen is running something like that, but going multiple games into the season where you don't know exactly what our offense is a little concerning for me. And I hope game 2, he kind of figures it out. That's why I think that's a matchup to watch, is Holgorsen versus himself, so he can get us going in the right direction for the rest of the season.
I mean, kind of off of what Bobby said, hasn't Holgorsen seemed a lot more relaxed to you guys, like in his August media? And like, I wasn't at the game and I didn't have a feed where I had 100% the Dana cam there, but I mean, I didn't see a lot of Dana losing his mind about this and that. Even when the offense was struggling, he seemed pretty calm. He seemed pretty calm afterwards, even acknowledging that it wasn't the best performance. Like, I don't know, like, should I be encouraged by this? Like, this is a guy who just looked as unhappy as I've seen a U of H coach look at any point last season in the first 5 or 6 games, and even probably later points than that. He just seems very calm, seems like he's not surprised or upset about what the team did. And I'm not saying that as I'm not saying, oh, he should go back to be, screaming and talking about taking responsibility in ways that make people mad, or like I like these guys. I like, for just his sake as a human being, that he doesn't look like he's about to have a coronary in the sidelines. And I don't know, maybe should I glean any confidence in that? And also, we'll say, just 2 weeks in a row of you guys having interesting, like, out of the box ways of interpreting this, and me just going bland football answer, but I'm going to trudge ahead. I'm not going to call an audible here. The matchup I'm watching, maybe I would say, is a little bit of a zag for what you'd expect for the on-field matchups, but I really want to see what the Cougar defense can do in week 2, coming off this really good performance, this surprising performance. Can the Cougars not maybe have a hangover from this really unexpectedly great performance against UTSA? How the Cougar secondary specifically does against Rice's receivers and tight ends. I mean, the secondary was a group we had a lot of questions about in the preseason, but one with a lot of new faces, and a lot of new faces that performed very well last week against the UTSA offense that I think we expected to be a very difficult test for the Cougars. A lot of the new faces doing stuff like we talked about, Malik Fleming's 2 interceptions, Isaiah Hamilton grading out as one of the best 25 cornerbacks in the country this past week, and AJ Halsey, I think, being really active and involved from a safety position. And this Rice receiver group, outside of Luke McCaffrey, who did not enter the Rice program playing this position, is a very, very, very unproven group. If U of H can take away the one way JT Daniels will positively affect this game, because JT Daniels is about as opposite of Frank Harris as you can get. If JT Daniels does one designed run that's not a quarterback sneak this entire game on Saturday, I'm going to be floored. He's probably the least mobile quarterback the U of H offense will see the entirety of the 2023 season. So a guy who's got to affect the game, not by calling his own number, but by making things happen in the pass game. And just, again, on the flip side, if JT Daniels does better than expected, the Cougar defensive front can't create havoc, I think you start asking some more questions about that defense. So it's a matchup where the Cougar secondary now has some expectation that, hey, you need to shut down this very inexperienced receiver group. And I'm curious to see how they, I think, go to the challenge of now kind of being in an expectation of, hey, you should probably be shutting down this opposing receiver group.
Yeah, I like that. I think the secondary looked good last week, and this week it's where you definitely have the advantage, your secondary versus their wide receivers. And like you said, can you shut them down? Can you actually do what you're supposed to do? Before we expect more of players, getting them to do what we expect them to do is super important.
Passing the easy test.
Yeah, exactly.
But as much as I talk about the, one game sample sizes don't always mean everything. And, I've interpreted that in 2 ways that might benefit us, right? If U of H's offense is better than it looked, if Rice's defense is not quite as good as it looked, UFA's defense might not be as good as it looked either, though. So, you know, you got to take that into effect too, which is why, like you said, Sam, I think that's such a critical to, you know, again, what was probably going to be one of their easier tests the rest of the way facing this Rice offense is can they do something at least similar to what the Longhorns did in terms of shutting them down.
Yeah, Rice had a big receiver named Brad Rosner. I think was going into his 7th year. That would have been, I think, a real game changer if they had him and McCaffrey, but he grad transfers to NC State in the offseason, and Rice really only has one guy who's proven anything in the college level as a receiver. So, yeah, got to pass the easy test to make me believe in you.
Yep.
All right. Rice game then talked about. Let's go ahead and move on to our other college football games from the coming week. Bobby, you want to start us off with your Big 12 games to watch?
Yeah, so I have UCF at Boise. Boise looked bad against a really good UW team, University of Washington team, and UCF looked good versus a bad Kent State team. Can Plumlee correct the turnovers? Like I said in that post game, can he fix the 2 interceptions? Will he be able to do it versus Boise? One interesting thing is UCF is actually practicing at a nearby school, prep school, high school, something like that, that has blue turf. So they've been practicing out there all week to kind of get used to the blue turf. And one of the things Malazan said was he wanted to have them get over the mental aspect of playing on the blue turf. And it's something you've always seen on TV, things like that it kind of draws you in and you kind of get amazed by it the first time you see it. He's like, no, we're not doing that anymore. So, look for Boise to, with the game being at Boise, look for Boise to be strong, but UCF -3.5 does still feel a little low on the spread there. Any thoughts on UCF Boise, guys?
I mean, at least Boise, even though they got their butts kicked, did actually play a Division I FBS level opponent. Yes, I know Absolutely. Kent State does technically count in the books as Division I FBS. Well, he said Bob, they're a very almost an entirely new team and not a historically great MAC opponent. So, I mean, good. I think a very good and interesting way of planning for that kind of game, but I don't know. It seems like one of those where it's like, yeah, well, of course they're going to buy more than 3.5. We're going to look up a week from now, and Boise will have somehow found a way to lose that game. So, I mean, UCF would have found a way to lose that game at Boise. So,
yeah, I was going to say nothing else would be an interesting data point. And what's a better way to start the season, by getting your butt kicked by someone better than you, or just kicking the butt of someone worse than you?
Yeah, for sure. Then we move on. We move down I-35 from me to Baylor, and they host Utah. Now, honestly, I watched some of the Utah-Florida game. I didn't watch all of it, but watched some highlights and then caught a few quarters. It wasn't overly impressive by Utah. Like, I know that's going to shock some people, but if you really dive into the stats and look at it, they had 270 yards total offense. They were the better team, but then you kind of look at their 270, and their first play was a big shot 70-yard touchdown, right? From there, the rest of the game after their first drive, they got 200 yards total offense. Their quarterback went 12 of 18 for 159, including the 70-yard touchdown. So if you take that away, he's 11 of 17 for 89 yards. Any other quarterback in the country does that, and you go, I'm not really worried, right? Like, he does some things with his legs, but overall, I'm not overly impressed. I'm not saying that I think Baylor will win this game, but I think it's going to be a good game. I know Baylor lost to Texas State, but they're going to come out pissed off. They're hosting. Their fans are going to, I think the Baylor fans are going to show up and just kind of be very loud and angry. And I think the team's going to come out angry. And like I said, I don't necessarily think Baylor's going to win this game, but I think Baylor is going to keep it closer than people probably think.
I think the only thing that I would add is that there are a few teams I want to face with O-line problems less than Utah, just the most consistently tough defensive, or one of the most consistently tough defensive teams out there. To go in there with a shaky O-line like Baylor has and playing their second string quarterback, Sawyer Robertson, wouldn't be wild about that if I was a Baylor fan, though I think maybe not as emphatically as you, but I do kind of agree that Baylor is probably going to overperform maybe the general expectation after just a clunker of a week one.
Yeah, yep. I think my best argument in favor of Baylor's not going to make this closer than I think they will is that I think Utah's defense might outscore Baylor's offense in this one. And then we'll see if Cam Rising is back as well, because he obviously missed the opener. Their kind of main quarterback there. Looks like he is kind of still a shaky maybe for this one. So I don't know if they'll need him for this one or not. But I don't know. I'm kind of surprised that you think this one is going to be that close, Bobby. But we'll crazier things have happened in college football for sure.
Yeah. I just seeing that Utah offense, what I saw, it looked fine, but it didn't. I'm with you guys on their defense being, something that'll stop Baylor pretty close. But I don't know. It's gonna be interesting for sure, and I'm kind of looking forward to this game. And then TCU, they play Nichols. Look for them to come out mad and just kind of take it out on Nichols. So I'm not really gonna dive much more into that game, but I said that last week, and Baylor and TCU lost, so whatever. I think part of what happened last week with TCU and Colorado, like I said earlier, is TCU's was probably overrated going into the season. Colorado was a little underrated going into the season. And, as you guys said a bunch last year, water finds its level. So,
I mean, I think the only thing I'd be worried about long-term as a TCU fan is what we talked about in the preseason, like how much of that Gary Patterson defensive culture is washed out of there. And Sonny Dykes has not overseen very many teams with good defenses at 3 different stops prior to TCU, as much as he's been overseeing some very exciting offenses. Not really this week, but you kind of worry, like, once TCU faces offenses with a pulse, that isn't going to just look like Sonny Dykes' SMU and Cal and La Tech teams.
For sure.
Yep. So I will talk about my 4 teams. I'm going to start kind of in rough order of the Big 12 preseason thing. K-State, I think their first interesting data point, they're going to be hosting Troy at 11 a.m. on Saturday. Troy's coming off a 12-win season, Sun Belt Conference title last year, though. Do have to replace a lot of what was a very, very good, maybe the best group of 5 defense last year. They allowed 30 to SFA in week 1, but looking at the box score, there's a 30 that kind of flattered SFA. I don't think normally that, situation, that confluence of events would produce 30 points, but won't get sidetracked by that. I'm curious to see how the K-State offensive main pieces, Will Howard, the 2-headed rushing attack of DJ Giddens, and Treshawn Ward looks against FBS competition for the first time in 2023, because it looked quite good against FCS competition. Last week, Troy rushed for 342 yards in week 1, but we'll probably get a bit stiffer of a test in the K-State defense. I don't think really much to talk about there, but the next one here, Texas Tech hosting Oregon Saturday at 6 p.m. I'm weirdly positive about the Red Raiders' chance. This is my Bobby, Utah, and Baylor thing. I'm weirdly positive about the Red Raiders, even coming off that loss on the road to Wyoming last week. I think this is going to be a very different situation to their week 1. Tech is going to be in a more comfortable position as a home underdog with a big hostile crowd in Lubbock for a top 25 opponent. Projected high of 100 on Saturday in Lubbock. I know it's a drier heat up in the Panhandle, but I doubt Oregon is well prepared for any kind of early September Texas heat of any variety. Oregon opened their season against a bad FCS team, so the Red Raiders are definitely the more battle-tested of these 2 teams. I will admit, the Red Raiders have a lot of things to figure out from that trip to Wyoming. They can't afford to fail at critical moments against Bo Nix and was a Ducks defense that should be very, very, very good. Former UTSA offensive coordinator Will Stein actually running that Ducks offense right now. I think you saw at TDC Stadium the difference between a Will Stein offense and who UTSA has currently there. I think one other interesting angle on this one, Tyler Shuck, the Red Raiders starting quarterback, actually started his college career at Oregon, was the Ducks starting quarterback for the 2020 abbreviated season. I'm not saying Tech is a lock to win, guys, but I think there's an interesting potential upset spot here. I think teams change a lot from week 1 to 2, and Oregon is going to get their first real test this season. And I think you're going to get a really hyped crowd there. I think you're going to see the team play with a different, I think you're going to see Texas Tech kind of do what Wyoming did to Texas Tech in week 2, potentially.
Yeah, I think, like you said, the potential to turn around the home field, and not just like having the fans there, but just Tech wasn't used to playing that kind of altitude, and Oregon's not going to be used to playing in that kind of heat, and those things do matter.
Yep. And not much to add about my last 2 games. BYU is going to be hosting Southern Utah, with all respect to the Thunderbirds of Southern Utah University. And as somebody who's become, I would say, extremely partial to that part of Utah since moving out here, the natural beauty of Zion, Snow Canyon State Park, among many others, but nothing really to talk about here of substance. Pencil in an FCS win for BYU. West Virginia also hosts Duquesne Saturday at 5 p.m. Nothing worth talking about here as well. WVU is really, I think, their season really starts week 3 against Pitt the following Saturday in Morgantown. And so, Dustin, let's hear what you got for your 4 teams, unless you guys have any Southern Utah or Duquesne thoughts for the listeners.
No, let's go with it. After complaining last week about all my teams playing FCS teams, not only do they all play FBS opponents this week, but all 4 of them play games that Vegas sees being 1-score games that I really feel like could go either way. So 4, I think, really interesting, something close to toss-up games this week. Kansas kicks it off on Friday again, second straight week. Kansas playing on Friday. They'll be hosting Illinois. As I mentioned, Jalen Daniels expected to be back for this one. The Illini in year 3 under Brett Bielema went 8-4 last year. Actually finished number 21 in SP Plus with the nation's number 99 offense and number 2 defense. And then in their season opener, they needed a last-second field goal to beat Toledo by 2 points. So I think obviously the how healthy is Jalen Daniels question looms large here. But seeing that even Toledo was able to move the ball and score some points against Illinois, I think gives you some hope that the Jayhawks would be able to find a way to beat them at home. And then some more Midwest football on Saturday. Iowa State hosting Iowa. It's just a Kansas 3-point favorite according to Vegas. Iowa State, last I saw, 4-point underdog hosting the Iowa Hawkeyes. The game famously always just ugly and low scoring. That was certainly the case last year when the Cyclones won 10-7. A beautiful game in my mind in Iowa City. And, these were 2 of the worst offensive teams in the country last year. I feel like they'll both probably be below average offensive teams this year. I think they'll be a little bit better, but, scoring 30 against Northern Iowa and 24 against Utah State, respectively, in their season openers isn't hugely impressive or anything. So if it was 10-7 last year, I don't know, this one might be 17-10 this year or something like that, but probably not
5-2. It'll be 5-2.
That would be the most Cyhawk Classic score of all time. Dustin, are you aware of Brian Ferentz, the son of head coach Kirk Ferentz at Iowa and the current offensive? Do you know about his weird little contractual obligation?
I feel like it's vaguely familiar. As soon as you say it, I'm going to remember it, but not offhand.
I don't know. Again, I'll believe Kirk Ferentz's son is fired from his nepotism job at the exact moment I see it, but apparently he's under some kind of contractual obligation to average 25 points a game. They actually scored 24 in their week 1 somewhat body bag games, Utah State. So that'll be a fun little thing to watch all season. And also with this specific game.
People on Reddit are like, after the game, they were like, they scored 24. This is how many he has to score per game to keep his
score 25.1. The rest
it's like 25.1 or 2, something like that. It was so funny.
I'll believe he gets fired for not averaging when I see it, but I want to talk myself into being real because it's just kind of funny. Sorry.
And then Cincinnati is a touchdown underdog at Pittsburgh. The Panthers have gone 20-7 over the last 2 seasons under head coach Pat Narduzzi. Like Cincinnati, they started off this season by smashing an FCS team. SP Plus says the Panthers are ranked in the low 30s on both sides of the ball. Just kind of a very solid team overall. I think a really interesting test for Cincinnati after they've gotten maybe a lot of confidence feeding on the cupcake of Eastern Kentucky in the first week. So, kind of like I said, head coach Scott Satterfield, quarterback Emory Jones in their debuts. Cincinnati is a team looking good, feeling good, celebrating a lot against EKU, but obviously a whole different level of test. So really excited to see how they do. Like I said, EKU is a pretty respectable FCS team, but it's not the same as playing Pitt on the road, certainly. And then finally, Oklahoma State is a 3.5-point favorite on the road at Arizona State. And if you're the Cowboys and looking as shaky as they are, maybe you don't want to go on the road to face a P5 team just right now. But if you're going to do that, Arizona State would be the team to face probably. They don't look very good. They won just 3 games last year, made a head coaching change, tabbing Kenny Dillingham, his first time as a head coach at any level. And in their opener, they were one of the teams that very nearly lost to an FCS team in their opener. They barely squeaked by Southern Utah, looking even less convincing in their FCS win than Oklahoma State did. So that's how you get the Cowboys as a 3.5-point favorite on the road. I'm kind of upset that whoever wins this game is going to get credit for a P5 win because I don't know that either of these teams should qualify at this point in time.
I'm kind of annoyed this one's in the Pac-12 network, not because I think it's going to be a good game, but because I think it could be a very stupid game. And it's not the only decent late night game happening, as we'll get to, I think, with the week 2 slate. There's another one that I think is very intriguing in that time slot, but wouldn't mind having that one as a second option there in the late night. Guys, Kenny Dillingham, who Dustin mentioned a second ago, I think is the only FBS head coach who is multiple years younger than all 3 of us here on this podcast, which I gotta say, guys, is not gonna get better. Hey, it's me too, man. I'm in this bus slowly aging with the rest of you.
All right, so Bobby, do you have a non-Big 12 game you're keeping an eye on this week?
I mean, I'm gonna take the Tulane versus Ole Miss for non-Big 12. I'm gonna kind of cheat there and take what everyone else was gonna say. But really, my game of the week, I do think it may be Kansas versus Utah. I don't know why, but I'm super excited for that game.
Baylor versus Utah?
Or Baylor. I said Kansas. Sorry, I wrote down Kansas on my notes.
I think Kansas Illinois could be decent. Also,
yeah, I think that'll be a
good
one. But Baylor Utah is probably the one that I have kind of earmarked to watch, just to see if Baylor is as bad as they looked versus Texas State.
I'm going to say Auburn at Cal for mine. First and foremost, I find the idea of those two fan bases interacting extremely fucking funny. Maybe some slight cultural differences between Berkeley and a school in rural Southeast Alabama, but this is the 9:30 p.m. ESPN game. Cal absolutely blew the doors off UNT in week 1, scoring 58 on the road in Denton. This will be Auburn's first game against an FBS opponent under head coach Hugh Freeze, a man who knows offense for his many and numerous faults, has shown over his career. He's knowing how to design a good college offense. I think, as you'd expect from this late kick time, the game is out in Berkeley. It'll be a wild and weird game, which I think are two qualities I highly value in a football game. Dustin, what's your non-Big 12 pick this week?
So I do have to give a little shine to Ole Miss Tulane, just because, like I mentioned, 64th meeting all time between these programs, first since 1956 that they're both going to be ranked heading into it. This one is going to be a rowdy good time. But another game that I'm going to circle is Texas State at UTSA, just because I think it's a big data point for knowing how good and bad Houston and Baylor fans should feel respectively about their season openers. So that's one where, again, probably a week ago I'd go, UTSA is gonna roll in that one pretty easily. Less sure now going into that one. So that's obviously a big rivalry game there with a couple of very nearby teams there off of I-35, but should be a fun one. And then my only other fun fact, I'm not by any means suggesting that anyone should watch this game, because I'm going to suggest the exact opposite. But I talked about Oklahoma State being a favorite on the road despite not looking great in week 1. Maybe an even more surprising.
Oh, I know what you're going to go with. Yep.
UTEP lost their season opener to a Jacksonville State team playing its first ever FBS game. And this week they go on the road and face a Big Ten team on the road, and they're a 1.5 point favorite, because that's how shitty Northwestern is and how shitty Northwestern looked against the Rutgers, which is just almost indescribable. I watched like a little bit of that game. There's nothing else going on. They looked so bad. They look so bad. They're an underdog at home against UTEP, who lost to Jacksonville State. So
I just wanted to add to the UTSA Texas State game.
The HEB Battle of I-35, by the way, Dustin. How dare you not call it by its proper name? The HEB Battle of I-35. I don't even know if HEB is still a sponsor of it, but.
So I've made my way onto UTSA Twitter because, we played them. So you interact with a couple of tweets and you do this. So X's or Twitter, I forget, we call it Twitter on here.
We call it Twitter.
We call it Twitter in this house. On Twitter, I've been a little bit more on UTSA's Twitter feed, and I'm getting more stuff. Boy, Texas State thinks they're going to go in and just stomp UTSA. And UTSA's like, you wish you could. You wish you could. They are treating Texas State like we treated them. And it's just so funny because the Texas State fans are like, we beat Baylor at home. You think we can't rock the Alamo Dome? And I'm like, what is happening right now?
It's the beautiful, foolish confidence of your first big football win ever.
It's been so entertaining to watch this week. I'm just like, and like Texas State fans are like posting like, they're not sold out of the 300 level. We need to buy tickets. And like, they sold out of their allotment, and Texas State sold out of their allotment. They were like, hey, but our sections are here. So when you're buying tickets, try to buy them near here. Like, they think they're going in and just going to take over the Alamo Dome, and UTSA thinks that Texas State is just like their little brother who they are going to stomp by 50 this weekend. And it's one of the funniest things I've seen in a very long time on that platform.
I took in the 2017 game with the recent guest of the show, Jared, at Texas State between the two programs. And that stadium was at least 40% UTSA fans, and that might just be a conservative guess on my part. They definitely do have that little brother complex, Bobby, about the Bobcats. I do agree with you on that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, is that it for college football? Do you have any last college football thoughts before we shift sports here a little bit?
Nope, just I'm very happy that someone else without me brought up the UTEP being 1.5 point favorite at a Big Ten team. I knew one of you would, so I appreciate that. Thank you.
Knowing the spreads of games between UTEP and Northwestern is really a sickness that the three of us can enjoy together.
This is why we're friends. Unfortunately, shocking upset losses at the hands of Texas State was not something that Baylor football had all to themselves this past week, as Cougar volleyball suffered a shocking upset in San Marcos. Cougs went through to San Marcos for a pair of matches, were able to handle North Texas in 4 sets before taking, not just a loss, a pretty shocking 3-0 sweep at the hands of the Bobcats, who jumped out to early leads in all 3 sets. Houston only really made 1 set close, losing 25-18, 25-22, 25-18, and just really nothing going right on either side of the net for Houston. Couldn't stop Texas State offense, who hit a crazy 392 in this one. Cougs couldn't get it going offensively themselves, hitting just 171. So, obviously very early in the season, I think the results have been very positive up until that match. So I don't think it's time to hit the panic button or anything like that. But I think it's a wake-up call, if nothing else. No one you face going forward is going to be impressed that you have a ranking next to your name, that you beat some other team already. It's only going to put a target on your back. And, I don't want to speak for anybody on the team, but I think maybe they weren't quite ready for the target on their back on Saturday. But you get a chance to regroup, but definitely have to go back to the drawing board and start rethinking some things after taking, like I said, not just a loss, but a team that, beat you pretty soundly.
Yeah. I mean, looking at the stats on that one, it really did kind of feel like you as a top 25, to use a cross sports metaphor, basketball program, going in with a target on your back in a hostile road situation, your opponent really, I think taking their game to another level. Like you saw Texas State really just hit an absurd percentage in this one, kind of akin to a basketball team, just throwing everything they hit up against you, and just the game kind of getting away from you really after that first set, like it did for the Cougars. I think we mentioned it when we previewed that weekend out at San Marcos, that it would be interesting to see how the Cougars reacted that first time to a true road situation against an opponent that UTSA didn't go to the NCAA postseason the last 2 years, but won 14 games each of the last 2 seasons, went to the postseason the season before the last 2 seasons. So a program that hasn't been bad, program that still expects to win on their home court, sees that number 13 team like the Cougars went into last weekend, and sees kind of a target there. But we'll say we'll take something away. I think UNT is a solid opponent. You beat them away from Houston. But yeah, I think definitely has to be a wake-up call with, I think we'll get to in a second, or some big games you got this coming weekend up in Kentucky. Indiana.
Yeah, it really felt like this was a game where Texas State got some momentum and they just kind of kept going, right? This, as you guys said, has got to be kind of a wake-up call for the for Cougar volleyball, and this is what they should expect going into every game now. They are going to have the target on their back, and when you go into a true road environment, even at a school as small as Texas State, right?
Shots fired.
It is what it is. Are they packing the house for volleyball? We didn't pack the house for volleyball either up until last year. All right, let's calm down. It's not a shots fired, right? You have to realize that you are going to get the target on your back, and you're going to get every team's best shot. And so I think this, as you guys said, is a wake-up call for the volleyball team to really understand that, hey, this is, and I think Coach Rare can speak to this, guys. This is our chance to right it. The disappointing part is this is one of those games where you lose and it may come back to bite you when it comes to seeding for the tournament, things like that, and maybe it drops you down a place if you have a couple of other losses and you're on the bubble between a 2 and a 3 or something like that. This is the game that can take you down to a 3. So yeah, just gotta fix it, gotta correct it, and keep on keeping on.
Respect for this program that they still remained in the top 25 even after this loss too, coming in at number 21 this week's ABCA poll as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, number 21, and heading to an event that has teams number 19 and 20 in it. So definitely some interesting matches. If you're Houston, not exactly, just going back to some cupcakes to rebound from after that tough, road loss. Very much the opposite. The Cougs will be in West Lafayette, Indiana for a 4-team event. They'll face number 19 Kentucky on Friday afternoon. And then depending on, winners play winners, losers play losers, they'll face either the hosts, number 20 Purdue, or our old friends, the SMU Mustangs, on Saturday. So the game that Houston knows they will get against the Wildcats, like I said, they hold that number 19 ranking despite being just 1-3 on the year. They had a surprising season opening loss to Colorado State. They recently lost to both halves of a home and home doubleheader with a top 10 Pitt team, but this is a Kentucky team that was in the Sweet 16 a year ago, just like Houston. And then Purdue, obviously the team that you'd hope to face next. They started the season 3-2. They went just 1-2 in a tournament that they hosted on the opening weekend, but bounced back with wins over top 25 teams in Kansas and Marquette up in Lawrence this past week. And then if the Cougs do end up facing SMU, that's a 2-3 team that did beat a borderline top 25 Florida State team in a true road match this past week. So not maybe necessarily a complete rollover there either, but the Cougs, we do know, did sweep both matches against the Mustangs last year and have won 6 of 9 overall in that series. So yeah, I mean, like I said, this is, I kind of jokingly when we had David Rare on, called it kind of a death schedule, and he goes, yeah, no, it kind of is a death schedule. And this is why you face a tough Texas State team on the road, and you might have to turn around and face 2 more ranked teams back to back this week.
You know, I didn't go super deep on SMU, but this really surprised me. I looked at the American preseason volleyball poll that SMU actually barely edged Rice as the favorite to win the West. They brought in a bunch of transfers. I didn't go super deep on them, but they brought in some fairly proven transfers. I'm sure the NIL apparatus was at least some part of that there. You will get, I think, a guarantee of 2 pretty good opponents when it's all said and done. Kentucky, obviously, the first one. And then I think even the loser of Purdue SMU, if that's the direction you go, is still going to represent a pretty good opponent. Obviously, I would much prefer that being the Cougars going 2-0 and getting 2 good opponents in wins there. But again, good to see where this team is. You're going to need to see what you can do away from the friendly confines, away from the routine of playing home. And as we saw last weekend, not necessarily a team who's entirely figured things out away from home, but you're going to be opening your Big 12 schedule against a very good Big 12 team in Provo. So might as well load up on the tests away from home while you can.
Absolutely. I don't have too much to add. This is the measuring stick. This is what you want to try and do, and to see where your team's at. And you're getting to play teams that are ranked near you. So somebody who who everyone thinks is on your level, can you go out and beat them?
Maybe a team you'll be jockeying for, tournament positioning against in the future.
Exactly.
Possibly. Yep.
Exactly. Yep.
All right. And then finally, I do want to talk about Cougar Soccer, a program that we have out of the 3, basically nothing but good things to talk about from the past week. So that's exciting. The Cougars were able to beat Rice on the road and then dominated Louisiana Tech at home. Cougs actually fell behind 1-0 in both of their matches this week, but dominated the rest of the way to win both, run their win streak to 5 matches. So Rice scored in the first and the 18th minute, and going into about the final 5 minutes of the first half, the Owls were holding on to that 1-0 lead, and it looked like maybe Holloway Field was going to continue to be a field of nightmares for the Cougs, but Houston did get the 41st minute goal from Cameron Maddox to send it to halftime, tied at 1, and then got a second goal from Maddox early in the half to take the 2-1 lead, and that was it. Houston able to keep the Owls off the score sheet the rest of the way and end an 8-match winless streak in road contests against Rice. Yeah, a couple really impressive goals by the sophomore Maddox, who's looked really good. First one especially, had 2 defenders draped all over her at the top of the box, but found a sliver of space and drilled one into the bottom left corner of the net. And then the second one, 2 sophomores looking really good, making that goal happen. Center back Jada Gibson, who joined Houston from Georgia this offseason, took possession of the ball all the way back in Houston's own goalie box, and then just no one could stop her. She made a huge run, like almost all the entire way downfield. Finally slips it to Maddox at the top of the box. Maddox immediately just turns and fires and puts it in the net. So really impressive performance by Maddox. And then sophomore goalkeeper Olivia Dietrich was back between the pipes after not playing in the prior match. She had a career high 8 saves to allow Houston to hold on to that 2-1 lead for good. So like we said, this was maybe a little bit analogous to the volleyball team and the Texas State, on the road. I think maybe Rice Soccer probably not quite as good as Texas State volleyball, but this is kind of your first road team against the road game against a team kind of with a pulse, and the Cougs were able to get away with a 2-1 win at Rice, a place that, like I said, traditionally been very difficult for them to win at.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone's mentioned it. First win since 2001 by the Cougar Soccer program at Rice. Really been impressed with what we've seen from Cameron Maddox in non-conference. She has the ability to do, I think, multiple really good striker things. I think she's a nightmare to stay in front. She's not the tallest striker. She's not going to be the one that wins a lot of aerial headers, that makes a lot of things happen that way. I think that's more Allie Bird and some of the other strikers, but she's a nightmare to stay in front of if you're a defender, and also is just really good at getting in the right spot. Like she had that goal, I think, against SFA, where you would, I think, honestly say, yeah, the assist and run up to the assist was a lot better, but Cameron Maddox in absolutely perfect positioning for the second time in as many weeks here. And yeah, just really impressed by Olivia Dietrich and Jada Gibson, both second-year players, both players you could potentially have in your program for a very long time. This is a very young team, and I think these are all games that we expected win. Rice was a game that we said going in that the Cougars should expect to win it, but I think expect to win versus actually happening. There's a big gulf there. And also, I think probably the first time since we've talked about Cougar soccer versus Rice that Cougar soccer was big favorite in heavy air quotes, and went out there and won that thing, took the pressure of, hey, this is an opponent you should expect to beat, even though you have quite literally, this program has never beaten this team and probably nearly all the roster's lifetime to make it happen. To have now won 3 of the last 4 against Rice for the first time ever in the series, ironically, with the 1 loss in the 4 being from the Cougs' best team in program history, the fall 2021 team. I don't think there's anything meaningful there other than just, hey, like winning at this place has been a challenge, and give the team kudos, even though this isn't the best version of Rice soccer.
Yeah, if you can do anything that you haven't done since 2001, it's pretty impressive, no matter what you're looking at for the most part, when it comes to wins and things like that. So going into a Rice team that, like you said, Sam, has a pulse, one of our first games against a team that has a pulse outside of Washington, and come away with a result that you got to love. So
I'm glad you said for the most part, because I can definitely think of some things I haven't done since 2000.
And Bobby knew it.
Yeah,
Bobby was like,
I knew.
he's going to say
Bobby
something.
Can see that in my eyes. He's like,
I got it. Like a hawk, baby. I got eyes like a hawk.
And then the Cougs returned home to host Louisiana Tech on Sunday, surrendered an early goal in the 7th minute, but then answered back quickly with fullback Sophia Weber coming up for a corner kick and heading one home to tie it up. The Cougars just continuing to be dangerous off of corner kicks this year. And then for a game that we expected Houston to win comfortably, and that they did win comfortably, this one stayed 1-1 for a long time until just before halftime, when Alexis Folks, junior midfielder who joined U of H from Texas Tech this offseason, got her first Cougar and actually her first collegiate goal off of a corner kick that was headed away by a Bulldog defender, and then Folks collected it at the top of the box, put a line drive into the net to give Houston the lead. The game went to halftime 2-1 because of course it did. Houston's 5-game winning streak is now 4 matches that went to halftime 2-1, and then 1 game that ended 2-1. But in the second half, we just saw the dam break. Allie Bird got her 3rd goal of the year in the 56th minute, taking on and beating a defender, and then slotting one home, shot from a tight angle. And quickly after that, freshman Ariana Jimison made an excellent diagonal pass to Maddie Bowers, played her into the box. Bowers chased it down, struck an impressive 1-timer for her 1st goal of the year, 3rd goal career for the senior. And then mere moments later, Cameron Maddox, we keep talking about her. She's Houston's leading scorer on the year. She's basically the only Cougar who didn't score in this one, but she did make a nice run to the end line. She crossed and found Nadia Kamasa in front of the goal. Kamasa drove it home. And then in the closing minutes, we saw Talia Fagan and Ariana Jimison, a couple of freshmen for the Cougs, record their first collegiate goals on shots from each on the top of the box to make it a 7-1 Cougar victory on 7 goals from 7 different players. So we knew this wasn't a real good Louisiana Tech team, but I don't hate 7-1 no matter who you're playing against, especially seeing the Cougs spread the wealth around in this one.
I was just going to point out that Sophia Weber now 2 goals in 6 matches for the Cougars after I think 0 in 30 or 40 something career matches with the UConn Husky program. Is that a meaningful stat? Not really, but I find it kind of amusing.
It's our offensive system. She's a system player.
I mean, the offensive system this year now is
it's got to be working.
23 goals in 6 matches after scoring 18 all year long last year and across 16 matches. So
is that good?
That's pretty good. 4 players have already scored at least 3 goals this year after only 3 Cougs reached that mile marker last year. Houston also now overall just 1 win away with 5 wins, 1 win away from matching last year's win total. And they're doing all of this with 2 non-conference games left to play before Big 12 play even starts. So, don't need to totally repeat last year's analysis of Cougar soccer, but this team continues to look massively improved from last year, but, admittedly still needs to prove it against quality competition.
Yeah, obviously the 23 goals is somewhat a product of the strength of schedule, but still 23 goals in 6 matches against any level of competition tells you that something here is working quite well.
Absolutely.
So the Cougs this week will host their last 2 non-conference matches. On Thursday, they'll be hosting Houston Christian. U of H has played them each of the last 3 seasons and won 3-1, 3-0, 3-1. The Huskies are 1-3 this year, so hard to see them putting up much more of a fight than they have the last 3 years. And then on Sunday, the Cougs will be hosting Texas State. They were, a decent top 100 RPI team last year. They're off to a pretty underwhelming start this year. They were 3-3 with really only 1 game against a very decent team. That was a 3-0 home loss to Oklahoma State. So the last time U of H played a smaller Texas school that had previously faced Oklahoma State, it was SFA, and the Cougs matched their win deficit. So would love to see another couple of multi-goal leads, couple of multi-goal wins, I should say, even for the Cougs heading into Big 12 play.
Yeah, I might sweat Texas State out a bit if we had to go play it in San Marcos. It's like, oh no, we're going to come back here and talk about another spend a loss there. But I feel like it's an opponent the Cougars should be able to expect to handle in the friendly confines of Carl Lewis International Complex as well.
I just want to add that Thursday's game is pups on the pitch, so you can take your dogs. Owners with dogs get half off admission, and they're giving away a pretty sweet water bowl for your dog that I tried to tweet at our athletic program, and they have ignored me so far because I'm just trying to get one of those water bowls. They look really cool. And then surprisingly, Texas State is senior night. Not the last game, but they have it listed as senior night. So
they did that, I want to say they did it last year for a non-conference game that was well before the actual end of the season, but I could be misremembering.
So go out, support the team on senior night.
Yeah, if I believed it wasn't going to still be like 90 degrees at that 7 o'clock kick on Thursday, I'd be more tempted to do so. But I don't know if I want to bring my pup out to die of heat exhaustion on the pitch. So we'll have to.
Well, they'll have a water bowl.
Well, that's true. He'll have a water bowl, so that'll be good. And then just lastly, before we go, did want to mention Cougar Cross Country, which started its season this past week and had a really solid start to the season. Competed in one of their 3 regular season cross country events. It was the Lamar Early Bird Opener. Houston performed well. The men actually won the team title behind seniors Brandon Seagreaves and Branch Cox, who finished 2nd and 3rd on the individual leaderboard, respectively. Excuse me, that was the Houston men's first team title in any event since, I believe, 2019. And then on the women's side, senior Claire Meyer won her first individual collegiate title, while the Cougs finished 2nd as a team in the team standings. So this is a field that was made up of, besides U of H, Lamar, McNeese, and Louisiana Lafayette. So, not exactly a murderer's row, but, Houston also plays an event or competes in an event like this pretty much every year against a similar group of competitors, and rarely does as well. So it's kind of maybe a Cougar soccer analog here where you go, okay, who have they played? But also, hey, this is a pretty, impressive performance. I think, even level of competition being taken into account.
Hey, the only thing I want to add is that we were intrigued by Kyle Gibson, who is the Cougar assistant who oversees cross country and also the distance events and the subsequent indoor and outdoor seasons, because he was very much involved in a very good Oklahoma State distance program as an assistant up in Stillwater. Got a chance to be the guy running the distance program here in Houston under Will Blackburn, Carl Lewis, and one meet of good results there.
One meet, one win for the new coach. Gotta love that.
Go 1-0 while running just an absurd amount.
All right, well, I think that's going to be it for us on our way out. As always, would encourage you, if you want to support the Scott Holman podcast, you can do that for free by leaving a 5-star review in your app of choice. If you want to do so with some dollars for a mere $5 a month, you can support us. You can get access to lots of bonus content, like we mentioned up front. I would encourage you to go to patreon.com/SH podcast. If you want to get in contact with us, you can email us at SH podcast, and you can still follow us on Twitter.
My bad, calling this house
at SH podcast. I will hear no X business this house. It's Twitter. So follow us over there. If you made it all the way to the end of this episode, congratulations. You are a rock star. And as always,
go Cougs.